Have you ever wondered what would happen if you could take the claims of faith and put them to the test? Some people will say that you can't test faith because it's faith. But the heart of Christianity is that the central claim of Christianity can be tested. Jesus himself said, "I have come that they might have life and have it to the full," in John 10:10. He's not talking about life after you die there. He's actually talking about life now. The central claim of Christianity is that Jesus' way of life is simply the healthiest, wholest, and fullest way to do life now. One of the guys that I really respect is a fellow by the name of Dallas Willard. He said, putting Jesus Christ into a worldwide competition with all known alternatives is the only way we can give our faith a chance to prove his power over the whole of life. I agree with Dallas. You actually need to test Jesus' words. He invites you to. He says, anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. He's inviting you. He's saying, look, have a go and see whether what I am saying is true or not. What is this teaching that he's inviting us to put into practice? I think a really helpful summary is in John chapter 15, where Jesus says, "As the Father has loved me, so I've loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commands and remain in his love." Can you see, it's not just about obeying rules, it's about stepping into and experiencing and pursuing love. More than that, he actually says, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I've loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You're my friends if you do what I command. So what is he commanding? Jesus is commanding us to live a life of love. Love centered on him, but did you catch that? Love centered also on other people. We need to be ready to lay down our life for other people. We are to be people of love. As it turns out, that is the only way to live a happy and healthy and whole life. And that is to look beyond yourself, not to try and work out how do I validate what's going on inside me, but to look beyond yourself and to love. I appreciate the work of Arthur C. Brooks. In his recent book, he co-wrote with Oprah, Building the Life You Want, the art and science of getting happier. He looks at all the research about happiness and what does it mean to live a healthy and whole life. And if you're to boil it all down, it turns out that Jesus' command is what leads to a happy and whole life. He says that there are 4 things that you need in order to have a happy and whole life. And they're all centered around, funnily enough, love. The first is faith. He says in his research, as he looks at all the different analysis of what actually produces happiness for people, that faith is correlated with health and perspective and helping people find purpose in their lives and helping people be less lonely. That faith in something bigger than you. As it turns out, perhaps Jesus knew a thing or two. It's not just faith, though. He also says We need to do the work of caring for families. Sadly, we live in a world that has emphasized the rights of the individual over the importance of family. But all the research says that family leads to health, happiness, and wholeness when the family is healthy, happy, and whole. And as Arthur C. Brooks points in the research, he says, look, it takes commitment. It really does. Family is not easy, as you and I both know. Family is not always easy. It takes commitment. It also takes, as he talks about, forgiveness and honesty. But with those three things, families have a fighting chance. And we need to be the kind of people. Our families may fall apart, and it's not always as a result of us being dysfunctional. Sometimes it is. But we need to be the kind of people that do their best to help a family hold together. And doing that work to love our family, turns out it's one of the best things we can do for ourselves. In addition to that, he says, you also need friends. He contrasts what most of us call friends with what true friendship is. He says, many of us have expedient friendships, friendships where you kind of need something from each other. And he calls them expedient friendships. But he said, what you really need are useless friendships. Friendships with people who like you because you're you, not because you do something or can give them something. He says the best thing you can say to a friend is that they're useless to you. That means they're a real friend, which I think is interesting. And the last thing he says that we need is meaningful work. We all need to know how we are making a difference in the world. And in fact, I find it interesting, he describes work as love made visible. All four things that produce health, wholeness, and happiness are love. They're forms of love: faith, friends, family, and meaningful work. The awkward truth is this, though: you can't half do it. And that's where I think in the Christian church we've made a mistake. We've kind of sold you life insurance, where we said, look, if you buy the Jesus package, then you won't go to hell when you die. But really, Jesus never was into life insurance like that. What he was trying to do is invite people to a whole new way of life centered around him and his teaching. What he, I think, would want to say to us here in the 21st century is, stop looking internally for self-validation. Stop trying to work out what you're feeling and fix your feelings, because your feelings will not lead you to where you need to go. Ultimately, you will only find health, wholeness, and happiness in and through Jesus and through his teaching, which is all about love. He actually is the way. He's the way you will find the kind of life you long for. But you just can't half do it. You can't just turn up to church on a Sunday morning, say a couple of prayers, and have Jesus as your mascot. The final bit of the book of Matthew is often called the Great Commission. And that's where Jesus gives his final instructions to his disciples. And he calls them together and says, this is what you need to stay focused on. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth is given to me. Therefore, this is what I want you to do, he says. I want you to go and make disciples of all nations. The word disciple is the same root word we get the word discipline. And Dallas Willard and a few others have pointed out that probably for us Westerners, that a better word might be apprentice. He's saying, go and make apprentices for me, people who adopt my way of life. He says, Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then listen to this, he says, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. This is where I think we at the church, as the church, have to apologise and say, I'm sorry, we haven't been doing that. We've been teaching you to do all kinds of things, to sing and to pray and to have a nice time. But largely, we've created a Christian club where it's okay to ignore Jesus' teaching and have him as a mascot, but not actually have him as the locus and centre of your whole life. That whole idea would be foreign to the New Testament church, and it clearly was not what Jesus was after. My best understanding of what Jesus is meant to be for us comes from the book of Amos. There's this picture where God says to the people of Israel, I'm going to put a plumb line. A plumb line is where a builder gets a weight and is able to determine whether something's straight or not. He says, I'm going to put a plumb line among you to see whether you're straight or not, to see whether you're in line or not. And I think that's what Jesus is for us. None of us this side of eternity will ever completely match up to Jesus. But as we look to him, we discover the more we apply his way of doing life, the healthier and more whole our lives become. It's testable. You can test that Jesus' way of life actually does lead to life. So I'd encourage you, take some time to look at Jesus' teaching and work out, what would it mean for me to put this into practice? Maybe even say a prayer and say, God, what of all this teaching that Jesus has given do you want me to put into practice? What does it mean for me to live from love? My dad often had a line that I find helpful. When he was engaging with important ideas, he'd finish by saying, it's worth thinking about. And it really is.